Next, I've got Walter Isaacson's going to moderate a really great session on innovation and education. And certainly, Walter doesn't need much introduction either. He's the chairman and president and CEO of the Aspen Institute. He's been the CEO of CNN and the editor of Time Magazine. He's also a best-selling biographer. So please help me welcome Walter.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, our session right now is on something that keeps coming up in our conversation, which is education and how innovation and technology are going to transform it. I think it's a useful topic. If Ben Franklin came back today and walked into a classroom, he'd say, oh yeah, that's exactly how we did it. That's exactly what we made. A teacher stands there and gives a little lecture and 24 kids are sitting around. It's the one major sector of our lives that have not been totally transformed by the digital revolution. And I think we're at an inflection point. It's about to happen, whether it was MIT and Harvard joining up for edX, the way Stanford has already been doing for higher education, or what's happening in the K through 12 classroom. Starting with you, Bill, you've written about 4 or 5 things that are going to be transformative, but let me start with the first one you talked about, which is reimagining textbooks. How do you think that's going to change and make personalized education?
Well, if you get pervasive digital devices, very cheap tablets, and pervasive internet connection, then one can imagine eliminating the paper-based textbook. And an interactive textbook is a very different thing. In fact, the boundary between quiz, lecture, textbook is basically eviscerated. You can track the student, bring in a video, ask them a few questions to keep them engaged. And the invention of what that multimedia educational thing, call it the future textbook, but it's really all those things brought together. We're in the process of figuring out what that is right now, and there's a lot of innovators, for-profit, non-profit innovators who are participating in that.
Mm-hmm. I was at Sci and Math Academy in our hometown of New Orleans, where Sal and I come from, run by some Teach for America Corps members, and there are no textbooks. They just have curriculum, and the teacher's up there on a dashboard saying, oh, these 2 students don't understand that X and Y are different, and these 2... how do you think there'll be just a totally disruptive transformation of how we do curricula, or do you think textbooks will then just be put in digital form?
Well, we want to be a little conservative about this because, in a sense, every time something new comes along, they say education will change. Textbooks came along, anybody could read them. We got TV sets, we got videotape, we got computer-aided instruction. And so far, technology, at least in the classroom, has had absolutely no effect. So the issues of motivation, why should I learn this, am I the person who's good at this, there's so much complex human motivation in the learning process that to say that just to mechanize the pieces, like, okay, just click on the lecture, we don't need the lecture, the actual usage of things like MIT OpenCourseWare is mind-blowing for one reason. Basically, nobody uses it. I mean, take the very best Walter Lewin physics course, which is the 3rd one up there. About 3,000 people have gone through the thing. And it's free. It's fantastic. I love the guy. But there's no market for people at home at night saying, oh yeah, how do those wave equations work? Without a job, a degree. Mm-hmm. So far, this whole, hey, it's online, therefore it'll be utterly different, there's been as many failures as successes. Now, I think some of the stuff that Saul and Brewer are involved in are going to be amazingly successful. So I do think this time is different.
Saul, everybody talks about flipping the classroom, and you are the ones who've been successful at that so far. Explain how you think that's going to work.
Yeah, when you go to this reality, and it's been happening already, I mean, for us it's been kind of an inadvertent adventure, but you have this reality where students are going to a place and they're learning from videos and exercises and getting feedback. You start to realize, well, okay, they can all learn at their own pace now. And as soon as you make that one assumption, that every student can learn at their own pace, master concepts, then move on and kind of build a scaffold, it actually allows you to rethink every aspect of the education system. You no longer have to group kids by age-based cohorts. You no longer have to have a teacher in the front of the room giving a lecture. You no longer have to have all the desks pointed in the same direction. You no longer have to have teachers separate from each other. You know, I have 20 students, you have 20 students, and we have no peer interaction. And so what we're seeing is, and we're, you know, we started off as kind of a virtual thing for anybody out there to learn.
Actually, will you explain the story of how you started?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean,
my heart.
Yeah, New Orleans connection. You know, right after I got married, family from New Orleans was visiting me in Boston. I'm now in Northern California, and 12-year-old cousin, Nadia, having trouble with math, and I offered to tutor her, and a little, you know, 2 years into it, word got around in the family, and I was tutoring about 15 cousins, and then I, you know, famously a friend said, well, you know, I was having trouble scaling myself. I had a day job, and he's, why don't you stick some lessons on YouTube? I said, no, that's for cats playing piano, not real math. But then I gave it a shot, and you know, famously my cousins told me they liked me better on YouTube than in person.
That's right.
And so I kept going, and so yeah, the YouTube videos, you know, there's a ton of them now. There's 6 million kids using it every month now. We're a team of 30 people now. But yeah, so and when we launched kind of in a big way and we started building our organization, we assumed this is just a supplemental thing out for kids anywhere to learn, or adult learners too. But then some school districts said, no, this is interesting to us. This is kind of true differentiated instruction. This could be a game changer.
And tell us what school districts have adopted it, and give me an example of how that's worked.
Yeah, so the most famously Los Altos in Silicon Valley, they're now district-wide, but it's been KIPP Prep, Summit Prep, a couple of other charter schools in Oakland. I think the one that's actually pushed the envelope the most is a Marlboro school in Los Angeles, which is really an elite girls' school. And what they did is, they said, yeah, no reason for we have to do this Prussian model where all students learn at, you know, the same pace. And we're going to have a 7th through 12th grade girls all in the same classroom, all learning at their own pace. And if you visit one of these classrooms, there's a ton of peer-to-peer interaction. And what the teacher's doing, they're no longer the lecturer. They're doing one-on-one interactions. It's made the classroom more of an interactive or human experience.
Bror, what have you learned about how people learn, and how does that get applied? And maybe even do it, if you would, in an international context. So many people here from around the world. You know, what have you learned from around the world of how different people learn things, and especially in your higher education and career training things at Kaplan? Tell us how that works.
What's great about working now at this intersection between education, technology, and actually learning science is that all of these things are now ready to go, ready to get something really done. And on the learning science side, a lot of the things that Saul is describing actually back up exactly what's being found when you look experimentally at how people actually learn. And there's been a lot of that work over the last 20, 30 years. Things like giving people control over their pace, and that turns out to help all learners, novices and expert learners. Things about using media together with a voiceover, and that's exactly how Saul Khan's videos work. He doesn't show his face, he's actually showing a key write-up as he's doing it, so your eye is tracking what he's actually talking about. That turns out to line up with a bunch of the research about how you should use media. Things about using simple informal language, things about technology then allow you to take a really good learning solution, because the best tutors do these kinds of things too. What technology lets you do is take a good solution, or actually a bad solution, and make it affordable, reliable, available, and data-rich. So all of those things now become possible for us to do, and it's possible for us to do around the globe. The materials that you create that are introductory materials and demonstration materials can suddenly become available to everyone around the globe, and then you have local folks who get together to provide that next stage of feedback and counseling and answering questions that the online materials don't actually describe. And that local work can also then become, culturally more connected to where you are and give examples from where that is happening as well. It gives a terrific opportunity to make the whole process much more efficient around time and effort. And what it actually does, and this is a little bit odd, but it begins to drag education into the modern economy, where to do all this, you actually have to spend a lot more effort up front. This is not typically somebody sitting down the night before and doing a whole course. It becomes well, let's look at the learning science, let's think about our objectives, let's structure this thing, let's figure out where do the interactives go, when do we need a person to engage, when can we use the automated systems. That can be a lot. You build all that, but now your variable costs come down potentially because you're using teachers, well-trained human beings in a system for what they're really good at, and allow the machines and the tools and the media to be designed to do the rest really well too. So at Kaplan, as a business doing this kind of work, we're trying very hard now to actually use large scale, we have more than 1 million learners, to begin to generate data, to do experiments along these lines, just as Saul is doing, to see if we apply this learning science now at scale as a learning engineering exercise, can we get those benefits, and then can we keep going and scale and transform how we do all our education? This is a very exciting time to be doing it.
So what Broad just described is really how a for-profit model can work well, because it can do the upfront costs, do it to scale. Yours is a nonprofit model. Then we have the model, sort of the Harvard, MIT doing edX, and Stanford doing it, 2 different things, whatever it may be. How do you see the mix of profits, nonprofits, and what's the advantages of each in this?
Yeah, I think it's all great. I think we really are in kind of a renaissance. And I mean, every week we're hearing of a new. I mean, Harvard and MIT; these are not small institutions. This was, I think, it was the biggest announcement.
You have 4 degrees from amongst them, right?
Yeah. So I'm making sure
And
that
Bill
they
never
dilute
got
their-
one,
yeah.
as far as I can remember,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Almost,
Yeah.
got an honorary.
He's getting a higher return on his. But I think it's all great. It's all innovation. I think everyone's seeing what works in certain contexts and saying, yeah, we should do that too. We should do that. Our thought, or my thought process, and it was really kind of delusional when I literally was operating out of a closet and for several years. It was that we are at kind of this inflection point in history. We've been talking about it this whole session, and I felt that any inflection point in history needs new institutions, and it wasn't obvious that new institutions to this point had actually percolated up. New companies had, but not new institutions. And so in my delusional, I read a lot of science fiction books, I was like, maybe I could be like Harry Seldon in the Foundation. This could we could read the same books, obviously. but there
People who
could be,
read the Foundation.
yes, Isaac Asimov.
Vanguard.
Yeah, but there is, I mean, it was crazy and kind of idealistic on one aspect, but on another aspect it's completely practical. Now, maybe we could do civilization scale education. We can make it free. We can make it an institution. I mean, this content I talk about, if Newton had made videos on calculus, I wouldn't have to. This stuff is evergreen. It's not changing.
Well, his notation was a little...
Yeah, and he was a little eccentric.
Leibniz will do.
Yeah, Leibniz might have been, yeah.
For him.
But so this stuff is evergreen. This stuff is going to, these videos could be teaching, and not just videos, interactions, questions, simulations. They could teach kids 500 years from now. And so it just seemed like too crazy of an opportunity to try to, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it as a business, but maybe it can be an institution. And that was the thinking for us.
Bill, how does that change the role of the teachers and help you scale good teachers?
Well, what we'd really like to know is, why is it so hard to get kids motivated around these things? I mean, after all, it's really in the kids' interest to get a high school degree and get a college degree. It's not just that you make more money. You meet more interesting people. Everything is better about that path in life. And so our failure to convince them to help themselves in that way, it's very disappointing. And the U.S. statistics are horrific. We doubled what we put into education over the last 20 years, and our output did not improve at all. And other countries, on the other hand, have done very, very well. So as for younger students, there's going to be a structured environment where a teacher is there supervising them quite a bit. One of the most interesting things, a conference Saul and I went to, we heard about a thing called the Alliance School, which is a charter school in California, which in the U.S. is where most of the good experimentation takes place. They have a class of 48, but when they asked the kids what they liked about the class, they said, oh, it's so small and personal. Well, it's because they have 16 with the teacher, 16 doing peer education. And peer education, where you have kids to help other kids, that is a coming thing. And figuring out how to technologically help those kids group together, make that work, that is super powerful. It's also very cheap. And then they have a final group of 16 where they're just looking at Khan Academy type content, playing some of the math game things. And so you do math by rotating through the 3 different experiences, and their results are way better than a class of 25 done the normal way.
You just said that most of the experimentation and innovation being done from some of the innovative charter schools in the country. In New Orleans now, almost every kid goes to a charter school, and the parents have choice. It's almost a voucher system where the money follows the student. So you have competition where a KIPP and a YES and a whatever do it. Why shouldn't that be the model as it is with higher education, where there's competition and people have choice? Why shouldn't that be the model to drive innovation in K through 12?
Well, it's not like higher ed is fantastic. The dropout rates in U.S. universities are higher than any other country. Their costs have also gone up, actually more than a factor of 2 in the last 20 years, and the output has not improved all that much. So there's pathologies there as well. The uniform approach, sort of monolithic state-by-state approach that we have, yes, that probably holds things back. But politically, to get that to change is very hard. I mean, charter schools, California shorts their charter schools in a way that most of them are financially unstable right now. And the union often argues for the status quo, whether it's against charters or against personnel systems. So it's very, very tough because everybody wants a minimum standard, and using a market-based approach, you worry that you won't hit that minimum, and so you get this kind of rigid approach as the acceptable.
But is that good or bad?
Well, I don't know how to. It's very hard to change. There are countries that do this better than we do, and you'd hope that we could learn from them. So you have, can we learn how to do personnel systems, and then can you bring technology in? Those are the 2 things that should make you optimistic about education, that people like Kaplan are on a for-profit basis, and things like Khan Academy really are going to catch on. But the institutions will be slow to recognize these things. Thank goodness for charters and some young teachers who are willing to essentially break the rules.
Bror, why do you think the profit model will succeed in a world where so many people are now doing this for free?
It's a great question. But part of it is because, as we just talked about, technology is not the only answer. It doesn't actually solve all of the human training needs. The human mind is built to take a lot of feedback, a lot of customized feedback, and to use that very well. There are some things that you can automate, and over time there will be more and more things. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to write a persuasive essay, you need somebody to give you feedback on why it's not persuasive and how to do it again, and then to look and see, did you get it right this time or not? Another aspect of this, why I think there's real value that people will pay for, is connecting the outcomes of education itself to the outcomes that are needed, let's say, in the workplace. So a lot of our work is in the higher education space, so folks go from us to the workplace, to many of your businesses perhaps. And one of the missing things in higher education is a very clear link between how are people doing in their first 6 months of work, and how shouldn't that be a feedback loop that comes back to the training environments or the learning environments to modify those. And from Dr. Kahneman's work last night, discussion last night, one of the fundamental barriers is the System 1, System 2 problem, which is that experts, more than half of what is human expertise in an expert's mind is subconscious. That is, when they teach a novice, as you do, you stick an expert up in front and have them teach, they will tell a novice less than 30% of what the novice needs to know to execute. It's why your first year in any job is an agony. It's because all the experts before you ended up not telling you more than 30% of what you needed to know the first day on your job. There are techniques, and we're experimenting with those at Kaplan, that come out of cognitive science, and I've talked with some of you about those things, called cognitive task analysis, where you identify with objective measures out of 1,000 people in your workforce, who are the 3 that you want to clone? Who are the 3 who are making decisions that are amazing for your business in their role? And then you can do an interview process to get more like 70% of that. and then create training materials and methods and practice that targets those skills, put those in place, and begin the feedback loop on with an objective reason. You can make it clear, transparent, what you're trying to do and why. And that allows you to change it over time, too. As the job role changes, you keep interviewing new experts and you make adjustments. Well, now that takes real work, I mean, and repeated work. It's also enormously valuable for both you as employers and for the employees to now sign on and know that the training track is leading to high-quality expertise that's been validated in the workplace. So to me, what's happening now, and it's terrific, is the free solutions are providing an increasing baseline of learning materials, right? You know, you can't get away with, you know, poorly designed lectures and then ignore the students, right? It's just, no, that's not going to work anymore. There's all these great free materials to provide a baseline. And then above that, that's where it gets exciting. What comes after that? What feedback do you do? How do you design outcomes to improve on what's available that's free? And I think it'll be, just like always in technology, an ever-increasing, in a sense, race that way. And so I think that's part of what's exciting about it.
So you can remember your days at MIT and at Harvard. Khan Academy has no such campuses. Kaplan has places where people go, but they aren't quite campuses like that. What is the role, if any, that actual physical campuses with human interaction should and will play?
I think it's a huge role, and I think the important part is what you just said, the human interaction. And the problem is, if you go to most campuses right now, yeah, we're all in the same room, but there's actually very little human interaction. I mean, I used to sit in 300-person lecture halls whole semester. I didn't know the professor. I might have known 2 people in the classroom. No interaction.
By the way, every professor who taught you claims that
yeah,
they know
they
you well.
saw potential back
Yeah.
then. Yeah, I don't know.
More people
I met a
taught
couple
Bill
of them.
computer science
Yeah,
at Harvard than
yeah.
even ever taught there. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I say, you know, when I imagine school for my own children, I imagine a highly interactive environment. And so what we think is that, you know, education's the spectrum. At this end is your, you know, multiplication, facts, and vocabulary, and then out here is building a robot, starting a business, painting a picture. I mean, really open-ended creative things. And what we see the role of technology is, okay, we're already doing this part, and we're going to keep pushing the envelope. We'll use data, and we'll make it better and better and better, and we'll iterate on it, and we'll connect it to real economic valuable things. And then as we do this, there's kind of some fear that I you know, oh, well, is this going to, because right now this is where school is focused. Is this going to replace the teachers there? It's going to turn them into, you know, monitors of some kind. It's like, no. This is an opportunity to move the humans over here, where the humans are good.
Mm-hmm. Bill, what do you think the role of things like social networks and gaming are in transforming education?
Well, it's fascinating that one of the educational startups, this one, Grokkit, has the ability to do SAT testing, all these things. And you can do the quizzes on your own, or you can do them with a group of people. And overwhelmingly, over 90%, people choose to do it almost as a contest, where if somebody is slow, then you can say to them, you know.
So on a social network, you mean?
Well, it's online, multiple people interacting.
Right.
The word social network.
Well, I meant, but it's not place-based. It's
No, it's online, exactly.
Online,
No, it's a $10 a month thing where you sign up and you have access, and you can do solo tests, or you can go into this sort of gaming-like thing. Now, the gaming thing, some people really take it where they design a very rich interactive game. Manga High's a for-profit that's done a pretty strong set of games for math. Our foundation is funding a lot of people like Zoran Popovic over at UW and others to do some rich games that have a way of engaging you in some mathematical things that you may not even realize that you're learning. So there's a lot of promise there. You know, gaming and simulation hopefully can make the subject more approachable, more interesting, more hands-on.
Mm-hmm. Kaya Henderson was walking the hall of Chancellor of the Washington, D.C. schools, and was explaining that with gaming, there's something odd, which is that the boys take to it because it's a real competition. And they will stay up all night to beat their friends and get more points and suddenly be 50% ahead. But, and I don't want to just make it a gender-based thing, but different people learn differently, and that gaming in some ways turns some other people off. Do you see that?
We do see that. Actually, I mean, the first complaint when the Los Altos pilot started was there was a subset of boys who got addicted to it, literally. Like they could, I mean, it was a good addiction, I guess, but they were learning math, but they were just couldn't get them, their parents couldn't get them to focus on anything else. But
Steve, what a problem.
Yeah, no, there are worse things. But what we did see is there are also ways to motivate girls with game mechanics, and it's not, obviously it's a distribution, and we have seen that girls are more focused on achievement, more focused on what they've done, more focused on their portfolio of actions, while boys are more focused on points, and maybe we don't outgrow it for some of us.
Figure people haven't outgrown it. Let me open it up for questions, please. If we can turn up the lights and raise some hands and get started.
One thing I might say about the
Go,
gaming
Brock.
side,
Yeah.
which is, it is actually very interesting because the risk is some of the gaming elements can wind up being more distracting than helpful. But once you kind of get an initial mastery, then the gaming elements provide that encouragement for repeated practice, which is what's needed to build a lot of fluency and familiarity so that the skills begin to be embedded. So there's this careful trade-off between when you're initially instructing and trying to get ideas across, the very first examples you show, and then practice environments that are exciting and engaging.
And as you've written about, that mastering that comes from is something we sometimes miss.
Yes, exactly.
In the traditional education structure. We lecture, then we test, but we don't give that.
Exactly.
And games can do that, you're saying.
Yes, games can do that, but so can simple things like worked examples, where you go from talking about what you need to do, then you give a demonstration. It turns out demonstrations are enormously important. Show somebody doing what you said, and then you do what's called a worked example, where you give people partially filled out work. And so you do a piece, they do a piece, you do a piece, they do a piece. It's exactly what the best tutors actually do. But the technology now allows you to take what is a very effective and expensive learning technique and turn it into something that can be distributed en masse. And that gives you then that experience and builds the mastery and confidence. And it turns out it shrinks learning time and increases the amount of mastery. It's fascinating.
And you should read his blog, by the way. Number one?